the drill, because this is perfect for this full-arm blow. So if you imagine group fighting, so unless you're a serial killer, you don't tend to walk around by yourself. You might have friends, family, whatever. Other people have friends, family, whatever. So fighting people front on is always dangerous. He's got weapons, I've got weapons, natural weapons. We've got things to hurt each other with. Whereas him, if he's not focused, I can juice him right in the face. And these shots are great little Judas shots. Bang! So if you imagine, you might be with your wife, with your kids, with your mate at the club. Well, you open up, it gets you used to. I've clocked that he might not be paying attention. Boom! Suddenly, one less fighter in the game. Make sense? So get these kind of shots. Whilst I wouldn't really do this in a front-on boxing match, if we're in a bit of a tussle and I see he's not looking, bang! Smash him right up. Make sense? Right, next drill we're going to do. If I can borrow you, sir. If you guys just turn that way. Yeah. Right, next drill. Nice and simple. Boys. Right, stand on each other's feet as we do first foot. No, just one foot. One foot. Yeah, right, sir. Okay. You will close your eyes. And your job will be to slap him about the face multiple times. Okay? Your job with your eyes open is to, without moving back, defend yourself, either with your hands or moving your head. Okay? Don't obviously go into deep place, just try and touch from here. Make sense? Your job to not get slapped, your job to slap. On my count, go! We do this for an hour. This is an important thing to learn. The thing to learn here is that if you don't move, if your defense isn't good, a blind man can kill you. If a man can slap you, you got slapped, didn't you? By a man that cannot see. If a man can hit you, a man can stab you. A man can take a bloody slide hammer through your head. If a blind man can do that to you, imagine what a capable sighted person can do. So I just want to learn this as a reinforcement of the importance of defense and structure and knowing what you're doing. Because if a blind man can hit you, touch you once, that could have been a knife, that could have been a piece of pipe. We're looking at boxing for self-defense. So you can't trade jab for a jab. You might trade a jab for a jab, but you won't trade a jab for a stab, will you? Does that make sense? So your defense has to be very on point. If a blind man can get you, a sighted man absolutely will. And that's a good little exercise I want to take back to your clubs to remind people of the importance of movement and defense, awareness. It's just a good thing to burn in someone's mind. You might think you've got good defense, but a man that can't see just slaps you upside the head. It's a really important thing to do. You get too used to the luxury of range. If I was to do this drill where they weren't touching each other, they'd have split apart, which you could do, but you can't do that in a pub, and you can't do that in a crowded city, you can't do that at a football match, you can't do that at a cinema, you can't do that in a you can't do that on a plane. So again, getting used to having the wherewithal to defend yourself well at all times is really important. Right, now, you guys can go out. Not like actually, wait, let me just go there. So, we've looked at full arm blows, being able to, when we see the negative stimuli, bang, bang, fire that shot. And we've reminded ourselves that the purpose isn't to box, it's to hit him in such a way to wiggle his brain and knock him out. We want to spark him out. And a bit like an instinctive combat shooter, we go bang, bang. We are shooting stuff straight from the hip. Bang, bang. We're not aiming, we are just firing this shot in. And we're doing it in such a way for maximum brain shake. What I'd like you to do now, assuming this has happened, conflict has kicked off, bang! And you find out you're fighting someone with a pretty decent shield. Then we might need to move into some type of safer combative measure. Fights don't start in stances, but it makes sense to have good defense once the fight's on. And you'll see this. You watch a CCTV fight, first 3 seconds, whack, whack, whack. Someone's not unconscious or on the floor. Even people that don't know what they're doing, they'll do something that they think is right. They'll do something that they think is right. The most complete idiot on the planet will still do something. Unless they're really stupid, and do that. But most people will put up something, because it makes sense. So now we're going to look at Monstery guard, which is relatively unique. So what I'd like you to do, assuming that you are right-handed, it doesn't matter if you're left-handed, just invert it. I'd like you to assume a relative fencer's posture with your feet. So lead foot pointing directly forward, rear foot somewhat of an L. No, it doesn't have to be extremely strict, but something like this. Yeah? And then sit on your horse, as Sue likes to say. Sit on your imaginary horse. What I'd like to do is with your lead hand, bring your elbow close to your body and have your fist supinated like this. Yeah? So your lead hand, what would normally be your jabbing hand. Somewhat like this. Don't have a gap here. Bring it closer. Yeah? Your rear hand, and this is quite a strange fist position, is pointing directly at the opponent. In the American boxing systems, one of the things they say is don't point your guns at God. Imagine these are your guns, these are your weapons. What the fuck are we doing up there? Might as well point your weapons on the thing you want to hit. Yeah, makes sense? You guys are all fencers, someone being on guard. Same shit. So our guard is here. And this is for multiple reasons, so we've already said. So this hand being here, this means I've got both sets of knuckles aimed at stuff. So whether I want to hit him bang right in the solar plexus, whether I want to hit him crack into the jaw, weapons are pointed at lots of targets. I've got high line and the low line of a weapon here. There's nothing to stop my low line hitting here, or my high line hitting here, but as you can imagine, this puts a lot of his body under a state of threat. If both are up here, I have to be pretty decent to knock down, which you can do, but this is just a good way to make sure always something is in a danger zone. Yeah? So our hands are like so. Another reason why we might do this, see this hand is supinated. If we find ourselves in a crash, our body's colliding, one hand is naturally in an underhook. Because for boxing for self-defense, you're going to end up wrestling if you haven't done it right. So by having this supinated hand, if we're blasting each other, it's not gone right, I've got something that's immediately in an underhook position that the wrestlers in the room know you can do something useful with. Make sense? If my hands are always up high, he's got a good chance of getting underhooks. So this gives you an automatic underhook. Are you guys familiar with the notion of underhooks? Yeah. Most of you. It's the idea that I can control his body best by having an arm under his arm. You know, I can move his body around pretty well from here. This just puts me in a natural underhook position. Make sense? So I've got weapons on a high line and a low line. I've got an emergency underhook in case I need to move him and bang him. Make sense? I've got that particular thing there. The next thing is the notion of milling. Some of you will know milling from the army tradition, which is a minute just bashing each other in the face, which is great fun, you should do it. But milling in this context is having the hands in always some degree of perpetual motion. Without it being ridiculous, the hands are in some degree of motion. Important pitfalls to watch out for. You can find yourself looping like a Zorotrope in the same pattern. You don't want to do that because someone will time you and bang! But by the same token, if you imagine a car going at 10 miles an hour and then going 30 miles an hour, that's pretty fast. A car going from parked to 30 miles an hour takes a bit more time. So the idea that my hand's already in some degree of fluidity, bang, I can fire that shot in, it makes sense. And you see, it's manifest evidence, because a lot of you guys, you do things like saving, defensive. Things that are already on the move a little bit, you can put a bit of sauce behind it, because it's on the move. This makes sense. So what I'd like you to do very quickly is assume Monstery stance, like so. Move your hands, sometimes forward, sometimes backwards, keeping the structure, but making sure there's some variety in there. And then I just want you to do basic combative movement. I'm not going to go over this too much, it's the same as your fencing. You want to go forward, lead foot forward. You want to go back, rear foot back. You want to go right first. You want to go left first. Just get used to moving around. Make it a bit more athletic as well. Make it more like shadow boxing.